I never thought a simple moment in the kitchen could change the way I looked at someone forever. It was late in the evening, after a long day of hanging out with my best friend. We'd spent hours playing games, joking around, doing the usual stuff. By the time night fell, he had disappeared into his room to grab something, leaving me in the kitchen alone with his mom. The room was quiet except for the faint hum of the refrigerator and the soft clinking of dishes as she rinsed them in the sink. I remember leaning casually against the counter, trying not to look as nervous as I suddenly felt. There was nothing unusual about being in that house. I'd been there countless times, but that night felt different. She stood by the sink with her sleeves rolled halfway up her arms, her hands moving gracefully through the water. The lamplight above the counter cast a warm glow on her, softening the edges of her face. A few strands of hair had slipped loose, brushing against her cheek as she worked, and for some reason I couldn't look away. "Could you pass me that glass?" she asked, her voice smooth, carrying that mix of confidence and warmth I'd always noticed about her. I handed it over, and as our fingers touched, something shifted. Just a brush of skin against skin, but it sent a quiet spark up my arm. I must have hesitated a fraction longer than I should have, because when she looked up, she caught me watching her. There was no judgment in her expression, only the faintest trace of amusement, as if she knew something I didn't. "You know," she said lightly, rinsing the glass before setting it down, "people your age sometimes think they've got life figured out." I laughed awkwardly, rubbing the back of my neck. "Maybe. I guess vedo." She glanced at me again, her eyes steady but playful. But the truth is, older women know more. Her words hung in the air, almost teasing, but her tone carried a weight that made my heart pound harder. She let the silence stretch, then added, almost in a whisper, "Let me show you some time." For a second, I forgot how to breathe. The kitchen felt smaller, the distance between us sharper. I could smell the faint scent of soap on her hands, mixed with the subtle trace of her perfume. Something soft, something mature. I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to laugh it off, pretend it was just her way of joking. But another part of me, the part that couldn't stop noticing the curve of her smile, or how her eyes lingered on mine, knew it wasn't only a joke. Before I could respond, my friend's voice echoed from the hallway, breaking the spell. She simply dried her hands on a towel, gave me a knowing smile, and walked past as if nothing had happened. But it had, and I knew, deep down, nothing between us would feel the same again. That night, lying in bed, I couldn't sleep. No matter how many times I shifted my pillow or closed my eyes, her voice kept echoing in my head. "Older women know more. Let me show you." It wasn't just the words, it was the way she'd said them. Calm, confident, almost playful, yet laced with something deeper. I replayed the moment again and again. The brush of her fingers against mine, the way her eyes had lingered on me, the soft curl of her lips when she smiled. It had been nothing, I tried to tell myself. A harmless tease. But if it was nothing, why did it feel so heavy inside my chest? Why did my skin still burn where her hand had touched mine? I rolled onto my side, staring at the faint glow of the streetlight outside my window. I thought about my friend, about how complicated this could be. She was his mom. She was off limits. Crossing that line wasn't just risky, it was unthinkable. And yet, the more I tried to shove the thought away, the sharper it grew. It was like trying not to hear a song stuck in your head. The harder you resist, the louder it plays. The next day, when I went over to their house again, I couldn't help but notice her differently. It wasn't intentional. It just happened. The way she moved around the living room, graceful and unhurried, as if every gesture had its own rhythm. The sound of her laughter drifting from the kitchen, softer when she spoke to me than when she spoke to others. Even the faint click of her heels against the hardwood floor made my pulse quicken in a way I couldn't explain. And then there was her perfume, warm, subtle, lingering in the air after she passed by. It wasn't overpowering, just enough to leave a trace that made me want to close my eyes and breathe it in. At one point, she touched my shoulder in passing, just a small, casual gesture. But it was enough. I felt the warmth of her hand spread through me, steady but electric. I froze, pretending to stay focused on whatever I was doing, but inside, every nerve was awake. I kept telling myself, "You're overthinking this. She doesn't mean anything by it." But then I catch her eyes on me for just a fraction too long, or notice the way her smile shifted when it was directed at me instead of anyone else. It was subtle. Nothing anyone else would notice. But I did. And it left me torn between two sides of myself. The part that wanted to be the respectful friend, and the part that couldn't stop imagining what she might mean by those words. That night, as I lay in bed once again, I realized something had changed. I could lie to myself all I wanted, but deep down, I knew the truth. I wanted her to show me. A few days later, it happened again. Only this time, it wasn't words that lingered, but moments. I had stopped by their house in the afternoon, planning to head out with my friend, but he wasn't ready yet. His mom was in the driveway, unloading groceries from her car. Without thinking, I walked over to help. "Perfect timing," she said, smiling as I reached for the heavier bags. I was just about to make 2 trips. Her smile disarmed me every time. It wasn't the polite kind strangers exchanged. It was warmer, fuller, like it carried a little piece of her attention just for me. Inside the kitchen, I set the bags down on the counter. She leaned against the edge of the counter beside me, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "You always show up right when I need an extra hand," she said, teasing gently. I shrugged, trying to play it cool. "Guess I've got good timing." We unpacked the bags together, her shoulder sometimes brushing against mine as we reached for the same shelf. It was innocent, almost accidental, but each time it happened, I felt it. That little pulse of awareness running through me. When we were done, she surprised me by asking, "Would you like some tea?" "It'll be a while." I nodded, maybe too quickly. "Sure." She set the kettle on the stove, and we sat at the small kitchen table while it heated. The late afternoon sun spilled through the window, painting the room in gold. For a moment, everything felt slowed down, like the rest of the world had stepped aside to let us have this quiet space. Our conversation started simple, about school, work, the weather. But soon, it drifted somewhere else. She spoke about her life, her experiences, the things she had learned the hard way. There was a certain honesty in her words, a vulnerability that I hadn't expected. "People assume age makes everything easier," she said softly, her fingers tracing the rim of her mug. "But sometimes it just makes you more aware of what's missing." Her words settled between us, heavy but gentle. I didn't know what to say, so I just listened, hoping she could see in my eyes that I understood, even if I couldn't fully grasp what she meant. She smiled faintly. "You're a good listener. Not many are." I felt heat rise in my chest at her compliment. My knee brushed against hers under the table, and I didn't pull away. Neither did she. The kettle whistled, breaking the moment. She stood, moving to pour the tea. When she set the cup in front of me, her hand lingered on mine just a little too long. The warmth of her fingers, the steadiness of her touch. It was brief, but it stayed with me. And in that moment, I realized something. This wasn't just a passing tease anymore. These small moments, the laughs, the touches, the silences that spoke louder than words, they were pulling us closer. Quietly, invisibly, but undeniably. When my friend finally came into the kitchen, the air shifted back to normal. But deep down, I knew something private, something fragile, had begun to grow between us. It was late one evening when everything finally came to the surface. I was sitting alone in their living room, waiting for my friend to come back from a quick run to the store. The TV was on, but I wasn't really watching. The house was quiet, wrapped in that in-between stillness that comes right before night fully sets in. I heard her footsteps before I saw her. Soft, unhurried. She walked in, carrying a folded blanket in her arms, and smiled when she noticed me. "Looks like you've made yourself at home," she teased gently. I smiled back, though my chest tightened. "Guess I have." She draped the blanket over the back of the couch, then sat down at the far end. Not too far, not too close. The lamp beside her cast a warm glow across her face, highlighting the thoughtful look in her eyes. For a while, we just talked about little things, music, books, the kind of topics that felt safe. But there was something under the surface, something both of us could feel. The pauses between sentences stretched longer than usual. The silences weren't empty. They were full. At one point, I caught myself staring. She had just tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, and the simple gesture pulled me in. When her eyes met mine, she didn't look away. I swallowed hard, my voice low. I haven't been able to stop thinking about what you said. That night in the kitchen, her expression didn't change at first. She just studied me, as though weighing the honesty in my words. Finally, she let out a soft breath. I wondered if you had, she said quietly. Her voice was calm, but there was something else in it too, something tender, almost fragile. My heart raced. I don't know what it meant to you. Maybe it was a joke, but to me it wasn't. For a long moment, she said nothing. The only sound was the faint hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen and the tick of the clock on the wall. Then she leaned back against the couch, her gaze steady. It wasn't a joke, she admitted, but it wasn't supposed to go further either. I felt a tightness in my chest, and yet it has. She looked down at her hands, her fingers lightly brushing one another. Then, slowly, she reached across the cushion between us. Her hand found mine, her touch gentle but deliberate. You make me feel seen, she whispered. It scares me because I know I shouldn't want this, but I do. The world seemed to shrink in that instant. Her hand was warm against mine, her thumb brushing softly across my skin. I wanted to move closer to close the distance, but I stayed still because the weight of that moment didn't need more. I nodded slowly, my voice barely above a whisper. I feel the same. Her eyes lifted to meet mine again, and the silence that followed felt louder than any words we could have spoken. And just like that, the line we'd both been dancing around had finally been crossed. Not with a kiss, but with the quiet honesty of two hearts admitting what they could no longer hide. The days that followed felt different, as though the air between us carried a quiet charge. After our confession, nothing had been said out loud about what came next, but in every glance, every lingering touch, there was an unspoken understanding. One evening, I found myself alone with her again. My friend had stepped out for a while, leaving us in the quiet of the house. She was sitting at the dining table, a book open in front of her. When I walked in, she looked up, her lips curling into a faint smile. "Sit with me," she said softly. I did. The chair beside her creaked lightly as I settled in. For a moment, neither of us spoke. I could hear the steady tick of the clock on the wall, the faint rustle of pages as she closed the book. Then she turned toward me, her eyes steady, her voice low. "Do you remember what I said? That older women know more." My throat felt tight, but I nodded. "I haven't forgotten." Her smile deepened, tinged with something both warm and sad. "Then let me show you, not with words, but with something that matters more." She reached across the table, sliding her hand into mine. Her fingers fit around mine gently, not claiming, just connecting. She lifted our joined hands, resting them between us. "Intimacy," she said, "isn't about rushing. It's about being fully present with someone, letting them know they're safe with you, letting them feel seen." As she spoke, her thumb brushed slowly across my knuckles. The simple motion sent shivers through me, not because of the touch alone, but because of what it carried: patience, attention, care. She rose from her chair, moving to stand beside me. I felt her presence before I saw her face, her warmth, her quiet gravity. She guided me gently to stand as well, and when I did, she stepped closer. "Here," she whispered, placing my hand lightly against her arm, just above the elbow. "Notice this, the steadiness, the trust." I swallowed hard, nodding. Then she shifted, resting her hand on my shoulder as she leaned closer. Her cheek brushed against mine, soft, warm, and steady. My heart raced, but she spoke in that same calm tone, her breath feathering against my skin. "Feel this," she murmured. "Not just the touch, but what it means. That closeness doesn't have to be loud to be powerful. I closed my eyes, breathing in the faint scent of her perfume, the softness of her hair against my temple. My chest tightened, not with fear, but with something deeper. When she finally pulled back, she kept her hands on me, steadying me as though she knew I needed a moment to gather myself. Her eyes held mine, searching steady. "That's what I wanted to show you," she said softly. "That real intimacy is built in the quiet moments. It's not about wanting, it's about allowing yourself to be with someone fully without shame." I nodded, unable to find words. All I knew was that in that moment, standing there with her hand still warm on mine, I felt more connected than I ever had before. And I understood she wasn't just teaching me. She was letting me into a part of herself she didn't show the world. It was late. The kind of late where the house had gone quiet, the world outside dim and hushed. My friend had gone upstairs, and I was left in the living room, scrolling absent-mindedly through my phone. But when she walked in, everything else faded. She wore a simple sweater, her hair tied loosely, strands slipping free. There was nothing glamorous about it, and yet I thought she had never looked more beautiful. "Still awake?" she asked, her voice soft, as though not to disturb the silence of the house. "Couldn't sleep," I admitted, setting my phone aside. She hesitated, then sat down beside me. Not across the room, not in another chair. Right there on the couch, close enough that I felt the warmth of her presence. For a moment, we said nothing. The only sound was the faint hum of the refrigerator and the distant creak of the house settling. My heart thudded in my chest, loud enough I thought that she must hear it. Her hand rested on her lap, her fingers tightening slightly as though she were debating something. Finally, she turned to me, her eyes searching mine. "You know this can't be simple," she whispered. I swallowed, my voice low. "I know, but simple doesn't always mean right." Her lips parted slightly, and I saw the conflict flicker across her face. She looked down, then back up, as though gathering courage. "Do you understand what you're asking for?" she asked, almost pleading. "I've lived a whole life already. I carry things, memories, mistakes, responsibilities that you can't even imagine yet." I nodded slowly, never breaking eye contact. "Maybe, but I know how I feel when I'm with you. And that has to mean something." Her breath caught. For a long, aching moment, she said nothing. Then, almost as if against her own will, she reached for my hand. Her fingers trembled faintly as they laced with mine. The touch was small, but it carried everything. Fear, longing, the weight of all the unspoken things between us. She leaned in, just slightly, her face inches from mine. I could see the faint curve of her eyelashes, the way her breath trembled as it touched my skin. My heart hammered in my chest. Every part of me screamed to close the distance, to finally know the taste of her lips. But just before I did, she pulled back, her hand still clutching mine. "No," she whispered, shaking her head faintly. "Not yet. Not like this." The words stung, but there was no rejection in her eyes. Only fear and something else. Something even stronger. I squeezed her hand, steadying her. "Then when?" I asked quietly. Her eyes glistened as she held my gaze. "When it feels like we're choosing it, not falling into it. When I know this isn't just temptation, but something real." We sat there in silence, her forehead finally leaning gently against mine. And though our lips never touched, the nearness of her breath, the closeness of her heartbeat, felt more intimate than any kiss could have been. In that suspended moment, I understood this was our edge. And whether we stepped forward or turned back, nothing would ever be the same again. The night after everything nearly tipped over, I couldn't think of much else. Her hand in mine, the closeness of her forehead pressed gently against mine, the trembling restraint in her voice. It all stayed with me like an echo that wouldn't fade. When I stopped by the next evening, the house felt quieter than usual. My friend was out again, and she was sitting on the porch, wrapped in a light cardigan, gazing into the fading colors of the sunset. The sky was brushed with strokes of pink and orange, slowly melting into twilight. She looked up as I stepped outside. A small smile touched her lips, the kind of smile that seemed both inviting and uncertain. "Come sit," she said softly, patting the spot beside her on the porch swing. I sat down, the wooden slats creaking gently under our weight. For a while, neither of us spoke. The air was cool, carrying the faint scent of freshly cut grass and the hum of cicadas in the distance. Finally, she let out a quiet breath. "I keep asking myself what we're doing," she admitted, her voice almost lost to the evening air. "Why I let myself get so close? Why I can't seem to stop?" I turned toward her, my voice low. Maybe because it feels real. Her eyes lifted to mine, glistening in the dim light. "It does," she whispered. "More real than I want to admit." Slowly, I reached for her hand. She didn't pull away. Our fingers intertwined, fitting together as though they had been waiting for this all along. "You don't have to be afraid," I said gently. "I'm not going anywhere. I don't see you as a mistake. I see you as someone I want to be with, someone worth the risk." Her lips trembled, not from weakness, but from the weight of emotions she had been carrying alone. She leaned against me, her head resting carefully on my shoulder. The moment her cheek touched me, I felt her exhale, a slow, unguarded breath that spoke more than words ever could. I wrapped my arm around her, holding her gently, protectively, as though keeping her safe from the doubts still circling in her mind. For a long time, we just sat there like that. No ruse, no urgency, just the simple, powerful truth of being close. Her heartbeat pressed faintly against my side, its rhythm calming the wild pulse in my own chest. Finally, she spoke again, her voice steady now. "If we do this, it has to be with care. No games. No pretending." I nodded, pressing my cheek lightly against her hair. I wouldn't want it any other way. The porch swing rocked gently beneath us, the night folding in around us like a quiet promise. In the distance, a dog barked once, then silence again. And there, under the soft veil of twilight, with her hand secure in mine and her head resting against my shoulder, I realized something simple but unshakable. Love doesn't always arrive when it's convenient. Sometimes it comes quietly, unexpectedly, and feels both terrifying and inevitable. And as she leaned into me, allowing herself to rest, I knew we had chosen it together.